Welcome to Highly Informed. I'm your host, Shaun Salvaje. Highly Informed is all about entheogenic education and news you can use when it comes to the world of cannabis and psychedelics. I am here today. We are on day 2, day 3. We're in the vortex of MJ Biz, and I'm here with Riley Kirk from the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy. Oh yes, SNAP. If you haven't heard of them, you've been sleeping on cannabis research. So Riley, thank you so much for joining me. How's your first couple of days of MJ Biz been?
It's been really wonderful. Thanks for having me on. We've been collecting data these past couple of days at MJ Biz, and we've had a lot of community data we've collected, and we've spoken on various panels about the different research projects we have going on, whether that's Weird Brains, which is a advocacy neurodivergence panel that we have going on. We have the Science of Smokeability, where we're researching what goes into a quality smokable product. And then we also had a panel on real-world data and how important that is to represent cannabis consumers.
Ooh, real world data. Yeah. I'm interested in that. So we got some news this week while we're out here. Texas just being real Texan. Not really though, because there's so much, there is actually a very big market demand in Texas, as well as like tons of talent. Hemp producers, cannabis side, or they want to be on the cannabis side because they had to leave Texas, go to other states. They're cannabis refugees. And we keep getting closer and closer to regulating hemp and hopefully cannabis. Getting ready for the ledge, and we found out that the lieutenant, that Dan Patrick wants to sue. Dan Patrick is trying to ban cannabis, all of it, in Texas. And he's really chomping out the bit this last little bit. And it just, that real data element is so important because as I was like brushing my teeth and vaping late last night, like just like all sorts of, but vaping first at last night. Then this morning, brushing my teeth. Never the two at the same time. Anyhow, as I was doing it, just like those late night shower thoughts where you're just like, how are we going to deal with this? What does this really look like? What does it mean for Texas? I'm sure everybody's going to be on the floor. The Texas takeover is happening. They're going to be talking about it. We're preparing for the ledge. We're actually hosting Texas Cannabis Collective as soon as I get back that same week on Friday, December 13th or something like that. We have a lobby day, and we're going to take everyone. If you're from Texas and you want to come out, learn how the legislature works and where all the rooms are so you can come testify for the 2025 ledge. We're going to show you how to do that.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, we're really trying, man, because
that's lowering the barrier. It's scary to go to the State House.
And the people have spoken.
Yeah.
Like the majority of Texans support it. Mm-hmm. And then we have articles coming out with this, this information where they're suggesting that hemp retailers are trying to loophole through because they want to get kids, because they want to provide terrible products, because they want to cause harm. And the desire, it's like so many operators are already self-regulating or trying to pay for the data that scientists like you are providing so that we can, it's a recreational adult use market that we're looking for, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have medicinal, supplemental, medical benefit. And it's like, so does eating your vegetables.
Oh, we say it all the time. It's like, even if you don't identify as a medical patient for cannabis, if you're using a medicinal plant, you're getting the medicinal benefits of that plant. So whether it's just like lowering inflammation on your body and your brain, or whether it's just reducing stress, like you are still getting benefits from that plant. So that's why we often say like adult use instead of recreational, because you're not just having fun with it. Like you're just able to use it because you're an adult.
Like, I don't know what you're talking about, recreational. Like for me, with PTSD, with autoimmune issues, being a single parent, trying to run a business, picking cannabis and psychedelics as an industry to help legalize and bring forward, because I really believe in the power of the medicine. Like, I'm not just zoned out anywhere. I'm hyper focused. It helps me treat my ADD. And I know we can't make medical claims. I'm not
but
a doc,
at the same time, like we all have these stories we want to share. And you brought it up earlier, like we just need data behind it, because when you are speaking in front of legislators and governments, data is the language they speak, right?
Numbers talk.
Yeah,
man.
so a lot of what we do through our nonprofit is we're trying to collect data to use that science as advocacy, because we don't want to just say like, so many people benefit from this plant. We want to say, okay, in your state of Texas, 40% of people are using for medical purposes, 30% of people aren't. 40% of people say it's not safe to get cannabis.
You can't even measure that really in Texas. So we have medical. Texas does have a small medical program. There are very limited licensed operators. We were supposed to get more, but then someone kicked the ball down the line, and we're trying to figure things out. And what we're finding, like when people do come to Ledge or when I'm listening to patient stories, they're telling me there is no medical, they don't have access to medical cannabis either for affordability or because there is no facility within their vicinity. So where are they going? They're going to those hemp shops. They're trying to find out, is there an alternative cannabinoid that can help me?
Yeah.
Or they're going back to the illicit market where they're getting products like, as much love as I have for the traditional legacy market. And there are some really great operators out there who really care about the plant and they want to come to the regulated side, but it's hard financially to do it. And we're making it so much harder. And we're actually, the first thing that came to mind when he was like, we must ban THC. Now, he doesn't talk like that, but I just have to, we're going to have to ban THC in the state of Texas to save the children. And it just eats me alive because no, you're just contributing to the very issue that we have border issues that now plague the nation. We've got stuff from the war on drugs that's still residual. And you want to perpetuate this, which, by the way, was a Joe Biden agenda. Let's go with the 1994 crime. But you want to perpetuate this, Texas.
It all comes down to access. It all comes down to access. When we're talking about hemp loopholes, when we're talking about the illicit market, like in states that have access to quality cannabis, almost all statistics are going down. We're thinking about
tell me more about what you've learned about that and like how the data that you've seen from the like what kind of projects are you working on right now? What are you really excited about leaning into the future? And what am I going to be able to bring into Texas to be like my friends at the Ledge, senators? We can figure this out and we can do something good for Texas, and here's the data. Like, what do you have cooking?
Yeah, I mean, we have so much data in general, but I think you mentioned that they were looking to ban smokeable products. Was that something that you mentioned too?
Smokeable hemp is like a question because you can buy product and then whatever the consumer does with it after is what they do. And then there's also that you have smokeable hemp there is an injunction right now. So they did try to take it away a bit ago. And this is how I kind of realized like much of our law in the US, and this is not what we planned for. Like we're going to talk about science, guys, but it's so important to cover this because we need more scientists like you. We need more data.
We need more relevant data that's actually representing what people experience.
And that's how you win a legal case.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
That's how this is done. Like we all think, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill, right?
I'm just a bill.
Oh, I wish it was like that.
Yeah.
I'm a bill that will also go through a litigation process, that will also be like appealed, that will also like everything is made through litigation and learning it. So like the older I get, the closer more decades in, the more I'm like, oh my God, they write the litigation, then we have to rewrite we have to rewrite it through lawsuit.
Yeah.
So how do we have it right now? It's through an injunction. There is a lawsuit. And I was like,
Yeah, so one of the projects we're working on is the science of smokeability, because a lot of states or a lot of medical providers say nobody should be smoking weed. It's bad for you. Don't smoke. You can vape, you can take edibles, blah, blah, blah. But what we know is, one, smoking produces unique chemistry that most medical patients still prefer smoking as their consumption method. We should take that seriously. It's producing unique chemistry. It's producing unique pharmacology. People need this medicine. So what we're trying to do with this project is show that there's ways to cultivate plants and post-harvest techniques like the dry and cure that can make a healthier smokable product. And that's something we should be studying as an industry, because if there's a way to limit the amount of toxicants that are entering people's body, but they can still get the medicinal potential from that plant, that's what our focus is. Because right now in our industry, we have no metric for quality. It's all based on like marketing and reputation and, whatever
COA testing requirement.
But most people aren't even looking at the COAs when they go to buy cannabis. We don't have time. You're walking in a dispensary and you're like, that one, right? But what if we had like a 5-star system that was rated on some sort of objective measurement of quality? You know, that's kind of something that we're moving towards, because yes, people also would pay more for quality cannabis, but also it'd separate the good people from the bad people and really start to evolve the industry based on science and like more than just reputation.
Yeah, it was crazy because I was talking to my driver last night and he was just randomly, he was like, what is this conference? Which I'm sure all the drivers in Vegas are like, what is this conference?
Why does everything smell like weed?
Yeah, there's and also there's like a million, there's a pizza conference coming up. He was like,
awesome.
Are you at the pizza conference? And I was like, that is sick, actually.
Perfect synergy.
Yeah, MJ Biz, take notes. Can we time this with the pizza conference next time?
I love that.
They're like, no, man, we're trying to time this with like investor conferences, you dork.
You dork.
I want some pizza. We love the cheese. But he was telling me, he was like, oh, you know, I don't really consume a lot, but it's really interesting to me how people get it off the street. I would so much rather be able to go into a store and know, he was like, if I had that available, I would consider other options. But because it's not available, no, I'm not going to go like buy from, and they're not calling it the traditional market. They're, you know, I'm not going to buy it from some guy on the street. And that also, like, by creating that system of like a plug legacy market operation means that we're forcing consumers into spaces where they don't know what they're getting. What have you found with like science of smokeability? What have you been finding as far as what does happen when we're combusting the plant? What are you learning? What's exciting you?
Yeah, so our first phase of science of smokeability was looking at water activity, different water activities. So essentially your moisture levels. So we looked at 0.45, 0.65, and 0.85. 0.85 is very wet. Nobody's smoking 0.85 weed. But what we do is we take science of smokeability and we kind of divide it into 2 different spaces. So one of those is just looking at the chemistry. That's our objective measurements that we're using a smoking machine. You put in joints. It's literally meant to smoke weed. So you put in a joint, it's smoking it. We're collecting the chemistry, and then we analyze the chemistry for like what's being produced with these different variables we're looking at. But then we also, for any phase we send out pre-rolls to people, and we have people actually participate in the science because we know like the smoking experience isn't just the chemistry. It's, you know, people can feel quality. They know how harsh it is. They know the texture of the smoke. They know how much, you know, mouth tingling it feels. There's so many different factors of that. So we wanted to combine both of those measurements to get a more nuanced look at the smoking experience.
Like a more holistic perspective, not just the data, but actually the human experience.
Exactly. And also make consumers feel respected as experts in this industry, because we do respect the consumers, and we say, oh, you've been smoking weed for 15 years. You're an expert in smoking weed. And even though nobody has ever given you that, you know, that validity, and that credit in what you do, like, we respect that. And we say, like, you know, we're scientists, but we only can do so much. We need the community to contribute too and say like what their opinion is. And also we want people to be involved in that research so that they feel attached to it. So they also want to share that research with people. So
I feel like that's so grossly underestimated. And it's kind of surprising because I've worked in startups and other industries before cannabis. And I've also, like, I worked for the government. It's not a secret. I was, and you look at big numbers when you work for the government because you're interested in what's moving the nation.
Yeah.
How is the nation doing? Is the nation healthy? And because we're also, like, in the military, at least, we've been sounding an alarm, like the nation's not healthy. There's fewer people who will be qualified to help if, God forbid, something crazy happened.
Yeah.
And that's really what the bottom line is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be, do we want to go fund some crazy activity in some part of the world that we're not quite sure where's the money going? But you pay attention to those numbers, and you need that big data. You need that human experience information, because in any other industry, that would influence how you operate. But for some reason, there's been some kind of disconnect. And I think it's because having the privilege of being in the early stages of the industry means you're in the Wild West, you have a hot product that people want. So you don't have to have a high standard at first.
Yeah.
But that is changing. It has significantly changed, and it's rapidly evolving in a much shorter time frame. Like, what are you guys finding as far as people want something different, and the consumers are where we actually evolve the business because the consumers know what they want. I don't understand the lack of respect. We also,
as an industry, need to be publishing research so much faster than traditional research, like peer-reviewed traditional academic research.
Right.
The pace that the cannabis industry moves at is so fast. And if we were to take that traditional like clinical model, the thing we'd be publishing on would have happened 3 years ago, and it'd be completely irrelevant by the time that we were actually getting it out to people. So that's another thing we do is like some of the way we get our information out about our studies is very non-traditional, whether that's white papers, podcasts, short form reels and stuff, but it's real data and we still get that information out there, but we want to make sure it's in people's hands as quickly as possible before things change. But I think something that's so important in the cannabis industry with involving consumers is developing that line of trust with consumers. Trust is everything in this industry, right? And if academia or the government were to come to a bunch of stoners and say, hey, you mind telling me exactly what you consumed today, what time, and how you felt? People would be like, absolutely not. I'm not sharing that with you. Like the government's been against us for decades, like, or, you know, for hundreds of years.
Plus it's your private, there's a level of privacy that you're entitled to as an American citizen. Like,
exactly. And that transparency too of like, I think research has always been like us versus them. It's like these people on a pedestal being like, give us your answers to this and we'll write it up. Instead, it's like when we are introducing the study, the way we tell people, like show people how to smoke their joint at home and how to like take all the data is we record ourselves smoking a joint and we say, this is exactly what you should be doing. At this point, you should be at question number 4. So instead, it's like they know that us as researchers are also stoners. We're also smoking weed. We're part of this research. And it's not us versus you. It's like all of us together. And this research benefits all of us. You know, we're not going to take it and use it for IP and not tell anybody about what we're doing. Instead, it's like everything we do, we're sharing so that we can all come along for the ride. And hopefully, because we're being so transparent, people will want to support us because they're getting that information too.
Yeah, I feel like that is a make or break in the industry. Like, I think a lot of people, and you guys check me if I'm wrong. Everybody, I don't have a problem. I think a lot of people come from that angle of there's a level of scarcity, and so we must compete. And how dare you touch my intellectual property or even try to do what I'm doing? And I've always been of the mind, like, yes, you do need to protect intellectual property. You do. Get your ducks in a row. But at the same time, like limiting conversations and education because we're so afraid someone else is going to do it better. No one can do it like me. No one can do it like you. No one can do it like, we talked about this with JB from Illicit Gardens. They can steal his process, but they will never be able to show up every day the way that he does.
Or talk about it with the same passion. Yeah.
So sharing the information, the education, I'm not afraid of it because, and also, are we not supposed to be getting better with every iteration? Like what you shared yesterday, like terps. We were all about those terps.
Yeah.
It even affected the COAs. Before, it was high THC percentages that people were chasing. Now they want to know, consumers have become more educated. They want to know about terpene profiles. Then I have someone amazing like Twinkle coming on and sharing, like, by the way, we're doing this science thing and we're discovering new about aroma.
By the way, terps are only the surface and we go deeper. And as you were saying, like cultivators have known and trusted their nose for so long, and then they're putting the research behind it and the words behind it so that people can communicate that.
The way that science kind of goes is supposed to be this exploration of our understanding of the natural world, not our making constraints and box and putting nature into this like category so we can determine regulations and all sorts of other things. Like, no. But science is the root of exploring how we understand what already exists beyond us, like without our interference, and then how we can do more with that.
Exactly. And we're already so heavily censored as an industry that we should not be contributing to that at all. We should be posting educational material on every platform in any way that we possibly can.
We're way too early in this game, like as far as the legalized market or regulated market. And I understand, like in California, you've had 20 years, like since 1996, and you've had some time. But on the blip of like, when I think of it, and I think I am grateful for my service and that it gave me this context of like globalized time and events. And 20 years is a drop in the bucket for anything.
Yeah.
Like if we look at the industrial revolution, if we look at steel, if we look at tech rev, especially, like, it is moving way faster. And I don't know about you guys, but you know, from the days of like graduating high school in 2004, and being like on AOL to transacting business and digital spaces, Bitcoin currency, like where we are now, that's only 20 years, my friends. Like it's only been 20 years. And look how far we've come since like 2000, early 2000s.
And the momentum of the industry, like being here at MJ Biz and talking to all the people in the industry about all these ideas and all of these things moving forward, like as you're saying, I mean, I can't imagine where we're going to be in 20 years just based off the conversations we've had at this conference.
Floating on clouds, man.
Yeah, for real.
Well, tell me, like, what kind of research projects are you excited about in the next year? Like, as you're gearing up for what NAP is going to do, what's really like tickling your fancy?
Oh my gosh. Well, we are hoping to contribute a lot more to like biochemical research in the upcoming years with our own laboratory. So we really want to study the endocannabinoid system more, and we really want to understand more how specific products influence the ECS. Because right now we have compliance testing that's testing for your THC and your CBD and your terpenes. We all have to do that as part of the industry, but we have no testing for like how well things work. And we really want to contribute to like saying, okay, if we have 10 different topicals, how can we compare these and evaluate them and say which one is better or worse? And how can we look at endpoints that matter for patients so that we can say, oh, you have this type of cancer, like maybe this product type would work better, or you have IBS, like we can do an assay in our laboratory to look at different product types that might be most relevant for IBS.
I wish we could like break that down for legislators, and you only get like 2 minutes when you're at the ledge. So it's hard to do, but to break it down and to give them that information, that if we could get to a safe regulated market, then we could do exploration into efficacy and like getting really granular with how specific products can help specific people so we can avoid things. Because I'm definitely not going to be one of those people who is like, oh, cannabis hyperemesis isn't a thing. No, it's a thing.
We have a study going on right now with CHS. It's a very real thing. And as an industry, we need to control the narrative about CHS instead of pretending it's fake and non-existent. We would be so much more better off if we all got educated on CHS and understand, yeah, there likely is a genetic predisposition. It's not going to just hit everyone equally. Same thing with many mental illnesses that we hear about, like cannabis and, schizophrenia or whatever.
Absolutely.
There are genetic predispositions for that, but also other things like SSRIs are absolutely contributing to that.
And they have the same issues.
Yeah.
Like when they're like, this side effects include suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
Like, and you're like, wait a minute, pull back. If we have these kind of side effects in other spaces, how did we get to safe use of them? And it was like, because we regulated, because we got into dosing, because we figured out who is it for and who is it not for, not because we just blanket denied access to everybody.
And guess what?
And doing that doesn't stop it. We need to get education to the people who actually, what if there's someone out there who is canna curious and it doesn't work with them and they have a bad experience that we could have prevented.
Exactly. I always say, like, if somebody trusts you with their first experience with cannabis, you need to take that extremely seriously. Like, especially if you are like a stoner and a consumer, don't give them the same dose that you would take. Like, this is their first experience with this plant. And if you do it wrong, they're going to tell a lot of people that they had a horrible experience with cannabis and that people shouldn't use it, give them anxiety. Where if you give them a dose that's maybe on the lower side, maybe they're like, wow, I've never had that type of experience with cannabis. I didn't know it could be that, calm and, have a positive experience. But same thing with CHS. Like, if 10 million people are using any product, there's going to be a percentage that do not respond well to that product.
Right.
There's never been any product
you can
ever.
be allergic to peanuts.
Yeah, that 100% of people.
We didn't say, fuck the peanuts, no peanuts,
illegal.
Anybody.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah. So that's the serious types of conversation. We need to think of it in a rational sense because we put cannabis under this microscope and we expect it to be safer than water. Like, it's a bioactive substance. It works for hundreds of different medical conditions. We're expecting 0 adverse effects at any dose possible for the entire population. Let's be realistic. That's insane. We need to look at it, how we look at other medicines, how we look at other recreational substances, like
how we look at food.
Yeah, tobacco and alcohol. Like, we need to start being a little more mature.
We regulate cannabis way more strictly than we regulate food and what we're intaking into our own bodies.
Yeah.
So help me out a little bit. What did you guys learn? Like we were talking about the psychosis induced from cannabis use if it doesn't align with your ECS, your endocannabinoid system, which is a reality, but not very common.
Yeah.
As well as the cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, which we don't want to downplay. We do want to acknowledge these things so that way we can get education to the right people. Aside from like the problems though, what benefits are you seeing? Like what did you learn about hidden brains? Sorry, NPR. Weird brains.
Weird brains.
Weird brains.
No, I love that you bring this up too, because everyone always wants to talk about psychosis and CHS. And it's like, all we have is research on the negatives. Let's talk about the positive. It's like people have been focusing on that for so long. Positives, one of our studies, which we called the Longitudinal study, this was following cannabis consumers for 2 weeks. So they were recording their cannabis use every day for 2 weeks, which shout out to anyone who participated in that. That's not easy. And our group of people who did, we had, again, 5,000 people, and our compliance rate was so high for that because stoners want to be part of research, and that shows in the numbers.
I participated.
Yeah, so some of the research that we found is 91% of people were daily cannabis consumers. And that statistic alone provided so much validity for people that felt ashamed for no reason for being a daily cannabis consumer. But, you know, we were just talking about SSRIs, or if you were on any sort of other antidepressant, anti-anxiety.
And I would say, like, what was it, early 2020 years ago, if you were taking SSRIs, you were very quiet about it. Nobody wanted anybody to know.
And now everybody's
to a
on them. Same thing with Adderall, right? And we expect people to dose that every day. We expect people to find their new baseline, to find their new norm, taking these pharmaceuticals, take it every day with food at 8 a.m., whatever it is. But with cannabis, we're scared to be dependent on it. We're scared to treat it like a medicine because society has always told us you can't be dependent on cannabis or you're an addict. You know, you're a non-functioning member of society if you need to rely on this medicine. So what this data is showing us is like, you're not alone in your experience of being a daily cannabis consumer. Most people in this study benefited from daily dosing of cannabis products, and most people used more than once per day too. Many 4 or 5 times a day, myself included.
Well, and I have this, and it begs this other question because I've heard other things about the whole plant consumption.
Yeah.
Including the nug, which like people would be like, what? That's gassy. Are you sure? But there's oils, there's lipids, there's all kinds of magic. We're finding flavorants, we're finding terps, Twinkle's finding sulfurs and other aroma profiles that contribute to like health and wellness. You find them in other things. You find them in fruits and veggies and all sorts of stuff. It's opening the door to like, if you're doing this research and we're finding that 91% are daily consumers, and those consumers are only being offered a vape or a combustible option, and there's this other option, like it kind of brings me to the pharmacognosy part of NAP, because so much of it goes back to natural medicines, whole foods. And we're having this awakening in the US right now where I think the general public is starting to realize we've got to change a couple of things. We've got some problems with obesity. We've got some problems, some serious. I work in the psychedelic side, and we are in the middle of a mental health crisis. We don't have enough providers to provide. And the ones who are, we're not 100% sure that it's working.
Yeah.
And psychedelics can provide an answer. I'm also leaning into there's a potentiality that whole plant kind of cannabis consumption, not combusted, not intoxicating, just a little nug a day, has a lot of beneficial effects.
It does, yeah. The acidic cannabinoids that are in the whole nug, and I think whole plant medicine in general. And I want to start this conversation with saying, I think our society is trained to only think of pharmaceutical drugs as medicine, right? And as I just mentioned, you're given this bottle by a medical professional that tells you exactly when to take it, exactly what dose. You don't need to think about anything. Cannabis requires so much education on a consumer. You're not just dealing with one active compound. You're dealing with all of the cannabinoids. Then you have the acidic versions, which you're talking about, and the non-combustive material. Then you have every single consumption method that you can choose that's going to make you feel differently. You know, then you have some people can't feel edibles, which is our survey data shows about 16% of people can't feel edibles.
I wonder how they would do with just a whole nug. What if there's just a whole different metabolism that needs to happen for them? Like, we don't know.
We don't know a lot, and it's never been studied. It's never been documented that so many people can't feel edibles because no researcher's ever been that connected to the community. And the way we found out originally that so many people couldn't feel edibles is from TikTok, making educational videos just saying like, hey, this is how edibles work. And then the comments would be like, oh, I wish I could feel edibles. I can take 500 milligrams of THC and not feel anything. I can take a gram of THC and not feel anything. And then we're like, this is a really significant portion of people. And if it was any other medicine, any other medicinal product that 16% of people couldn't feel, we would have studied that decades ago, right?
Yeah.
But with cannabis, we've never had that connection to consumers to even know this was a problem. And this is actually, you asked, like, what are some of our goals moving forward next year? To understand these things more that came to light during our studies of like 16% of people can't feel edibles, 64% of people use cannabis and drive. That statistic's very scary to politicians, but until they realize there's no increase
64% don't have road rage anymore.
Well, and there's a decrease in motor vehicle. It's not even about that. There's no increase in motor vehicle accidents.
Zero correlation.
There's no increased danger. So what are we worried about? We've created this own issue in our heads because we think that we're scary.
We also don't do that for any prescription medications. We're like, you should put it on the bottle. Don't operate heavy machinery. Yeah. We can do that with cannabis, but we let the consumer make their own decision. And also then whatever repercussion happens, that's on you. More of that, please, like more personal responsibility.
And we do have data that cannabis consumers in general are more aware when they're too high to drive compared to someone like an alcohol consumer who feels more confident driving as they drink more alcohol.
Because if anything, you get a little more conscious of what's around you.
Stoners are like, no, you can drive. I'd rather be passenger princess.
And with alcohol, you're like, got that blind confidence, you know?
And we have data to support that, which is amazing. And we have data to show, like, as I mentioned, that there's no increase in motor vehicle accidents. We have data to show that people who have a higher tolerance to THC don't have impaired hand-eye coordination. They're able to drive as normal people would.
Well, how about that high tolerance? You had mentioned something in a previous conversation or it kind of blew my mind a little bit because as a veteran, and this is the other thing with where we're going with legislation, I'm confused. The VA just said they just greenlit, we're going to test, I think, MDMA on veterans, and we're going to look into cannabis. They're actually going to look into it, and they're giving veterans permission because veterans have been, since the Vietnam War, veterans have been self-medicating from what they had seen,
right?
You know, or how they came home to, you know, in some situations, your country is happy to see you again. In some situations, the narrative has shifted, and it's not a very nice homecoming.
Yeah.
No matter what you did, and if you did the right thing, you were a good guy, you can still come back with a bad narrative.
Yeah.
And that's hard when you're coming home and you're also readjusting to not being with your family. Like you grow together as a family because it's life and death on the line. Like, I don't know if there's any other thing that can bond you quite as much. Like I've yet to experience it. Cannabis gets pretty close because you're really going through the shit.
Yeah.
But you had mentioned that for or like some study, or tell me, like, fix me if I imagine this in some stoner reverie, but that people with PTSD tend to have those higher tolerances because there becomes more receptors in the brain. Like what they're finding over time is that with PTSD, there's more CB1 and CB2 receptors. Can you elaborate and educate us on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it likely has to do with the trauma response, kind of what you're talking about, trauma bonding with people. But people who have...
We're all trauma bonded veterans. Sorry.
But yeah, people with PTSD have higher levels of the CB1 receptor, the cannabinoid 1 receptor in the brain. That's what THC binds to. And because of that, you know, they do have different mental spaces. So a lot of people with PTSD will develop a high tolerance to cannabis, use a lot of THC. And the way tolerance works is if you keep exposing those CB1 receptors to more and more THC, eventually your body takes some back. It recycles them, removes them from your brain.
It's like if you're vitamin D deficient, your body is going to respond by trying to get you to get more
vitamin D. Yeah, exactly.
And then once you do, that system reaction is going to it's going to slow itself down. And it's not going to be as necessary. I think that's why you see people who go through periods of mass consumption and they're like, you know what, actually I'm good right now.
Yeah.
And they come back later because it's a fluctuation. We're a human body system. Like,
well, I think it's so funny because there's these different platforms out there that are like, we'll test your endocannabinoid system and tell you exactly what products you need. And I'm like, for what? That tiny little snapshot in the day? Like your ECS changes like this throughout the day. So sending in a saliva sample is only going to give you a tiny little snapshot. You need something that can measure throughout the day and tell you what your dosing needs are.
A whole new industry.
Yeah. And I think that's where the future will go, because I think the people developing that tech just don't understand the ECS enough to develop that tech. And I hope that it doesn't reach consumers, because it's not going to be a good enough product. But people with PTSD, essentially, if they use enough cannabis, they can get their brain receptors to be back at that normal level,
healthy level.
Yeah, so you're at the same level that
psilocybin as
exactly.
Well. It doesn't have to be a big ass 15-gram mushroom trip, although that's great. It can be a long-term sustainable healthcare plan.
Exactly.
Or not. Let's stay away from healthcare plan, because there's a couple things. Like, let's acknowledge, and I would love to hear your perspective on this, especially from the lens of pharmacognosy and then pharmaceutical, because there are some avenues. Like, I know that a lot of people in the industry are very much afraid of pharmaceutical industry intervention and then blocking everybody off. One thing, and it's a valid threat.
It's very valid.
It's a valid threat. One thing I am noticing, though, is the potentiality for the pharmaceutical industry to do what it does best, which is create these extractions, other things, distillates or whatever, make all the weird shit you can make for, like you do in pharmaceutical industry, because that's how MDMA is made too.
Yeah.
Do your thing, and then that can be its own little bubble where we can use it for medical purposes. It's dosable, it's very consistent, and it's sometimes made in a lab, because you're specifically looking for whatever you want to do for pharmaceutical purposes and medical purposes, which have to be so specific.
And if they make it in a lab, though, that is highly regulated. And,
exactly.
And it's not just like what we talk about, like the Delta-8 industry, where it's like, oops, there's a bunch of residual stuff in there. It's like, that doesn't happen.
Then they can have that avenue for alternative cannabinoids, processing, and everything else. But it doesn't mean we have to close the door for these other opportunities, like these health opportunities where we're talking about. And this came up in conversation, is the FDA is not currently structured to understand or regulate cannabis, because it exists in a world that we haven't addressed yet.
Yeah.
Not in a regulatory space, not in a science space, not in any of that. So the hope is that we can get more opportunity, more research, more data. What are some of the challenges that you guys are finding? And then I do want to bring back, we got to tell people, what does pharmacognosy mean?
Yeah, I was going to start with that part. So pharmacognosy is what my background is. That's what my PhD is in. Technically, it's in pharmaceutical sciences, but I specialize in pharmacognosy. So that word just...
You've been in both.
Yeah. So that word pharmacognosy essentially just means studying the natural world, studying plants, fungi, bacteria, the different molecules that the natural world's making, and then how we as humans can utilize those molecules for our benefit for medicine. So this has taken many different routes. Some people still study the complex extracts of the natural world. Some people try to make pharmaceuticals from the natural world. So there's a whole spectrum in the world of pharmacognosy.
So pharmacognosy comes before we got pharmacology.
Yeah, pharmacognosy is the OG to pharmacology. Like,
it's the OG Kush.
It is, because pharmacognosy really breaks down into like the knowledge of medicine. So pharma, medicine, nosy means knowledge. So it, like, before we had any synthetically produced pills and all that stuff, we had people that understood fungi and plants, and they would make extracts, they'd make emulsions, they would, provide them to people in their community, and that was pharmacognosy. And then as we evolved and learned about patents and built this huge industry, that's when it turned more to like synthetic organic chemistry and away from the natural world.
I love that you said as we evolved and learned about patents, because I would have naturally just said as we evolved, as science evolved, and it was like, pause, they are separate. It can evolve, and this whole patent thing very much influenced how it evolved.
Oh, 100%.
And we're still facing that right now with how we're structuring licensing in different states and regulation. What's your hope? Like, what are you guys doing in Maine? Like,
wait. Can I step back just a minute? Because you brought up
whatever you want.
Okay, you brought up like the pharmaceutical side of things versus the natural product side of things. And I think this is a really important conversation moving forward. Because you're right. The pharmaceutical industry is not interested in complex natural product. They're not interested in RSO.
They want to do their thing.
They cannot patent RSO. They cannot patent a complex natural product, but they can patent a CBG derivative, a single isolated compound that they change just a little bit to be like a little more bioactive in the brain, maybe a little safer for certain populations. I do think that's where it's going to go, where they're going to take single isolated compounds, maybe manipulate them a little bit, patent a bunch of stuff, make it super dosable, do research on certain medical endpoints. I think that's going to be the lane that they stay in, because that's the lane they've always stayed in, is single
it makes
isolated
the most sense
compounds.
with how their framework is already structured.
But our industry won't die. Our industry is built on plant medicine. And I think that's what we need to start highlighting moving forward is complexity, things we don't understand, synergies, you know, the entourage effect, and really embracing that and showing that our community of stoners and cannabis lovers, like that's the medicine we choose. And if people don't choose that, there are other options that are more pharmaceutical, but we still need to exist here to represent the plant. Because as things evolve in the pharmaceutical industry, we're stepping further and further away from the plant.
So far away. Yeah, you take it from the botany of something to this pill.
Yeah.
Which for some people, like in the case of anyone who has a psychosis-induced experience or hyperemesis, if pharmaceutical science can find what is the beneficial ingredient and eliminate what is the ingredient that is causing that reaction, now we have a solution for them.
Exactly.
And it doesn't eliminate the opportunity for everybody else.
Or a simple genetic test that said, hey, Shaun, you're actually like 85% likely based on your genetics to potentially develop this condition. It's recommended that you don't use high THC products.
And we do definitely have, like, I did work with some epigenetic scientists who had developed new testing, still needs work, but they had done some work where they could say, hey, cannabis, yes for you, or cannabis, I'm not so sure, but it's still really new epigenetic stuff. And that's what available only to people who have access to pay for that kind of thing.
And that is a problem in a lot, including the psychedelic industry, where it's like, oh,
15,000 for a session.
Oh, you want ketamine? Well, guess what? Yeah, that's only for this 5% of the population that can afford it.
It shouldn't be if you have 20K, you can be happy like a normal human. That shouldn't be.
That's all mental issues. Is like the poor people are the ones that suffer, and the rich people are the ones that get spa days and the perfect medicine.
And the pursuit of happiness, isn't that a part, the ability to pursue happiness would be, I'm not talking about, cut me a check, but at least let me have a plant that can help me, that was here well before we wrote any laws, like well before any of us were here, the plant was here.
Yeah, and we need to keep representing the plant and medical patients. Like we need to keep us at the top of like, this is the focus of our industry. And then as you said, like if the pharmaceutical industry wants to do something, if the hemp industry wants to create all these zombie compounds, whatever, let's just make sure we have access to high quality cannabis and then do whatever we want.
Do it in a safe way.
Yeah.
Like I know hemp is a new thing. It's not though. It's not at all a new thing. It's always been where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
So they're finding it. And what we keep trying to share with the legislators is if we can regulate it, then we can make it safe. And there are some players who are already self-regulating, and man, can't we help them out because they're already trying to do the right thing instead of making this so much more difficult for everybody, which by the way, what the hemp guys are doing, the pharmaceutical guys will do on a different level.
And they're going to use their same methods. They're going to use their same methods.
They're going to ask them for their expertise. That's usually how that goes down is they're like, wait, you know how to do this? Let me pay you. Come help us learn how to do it.
But I want to say that to legislators too, because what I've found, because I'm on the New Hampshire Cannabis Advisory Board, we're trying to get a adult use industry in our state. It's an uphill battle, but that's not the point here. But for every state, it's like we're reinventing the cannabis industry in every single state. Why are states not paying experts to help them develop an industry? Like if you can look at a state that you say, wow, that state's doing things right. I think we should develop our industry to be similar to that one. Pay the experts the money they deserve, and they will help set up your industry to be the same. Legislators are not the people who should be making these decisions.
Well, that's the other thing is that we give half-baked information. So much of the regulation, like I feel like poor California got, yes, 1996, good job. You also didn't know anything. So you wrote these laws and regulations with no awareness of what was actually going on. When you restrict something like that without actually understanding it, it makes it let's keep it open. Let's be flexible. Let's get the experts in there, because the legislators are writing it based on some random arbitrary person that gave them information that said, oh yeah, this is the cap. This should be the cap.
Yeah.
This 1%, 3%, 2%, 30%. It's like, it's so arbitrary. And now we're learning THC percentages are really not that influential.
Well, and potency caps are whack. We had somebody asking us about this yesterday during one of our panels, and my response is always, if you have a higher potency product, that usually means that people need to ingest less. So you have less smoke and vapor if they're inhaling going into their body. It could be a healthier alternative. But also, if we look at the pharmaceutical equivalent to THC, it's Marinol. And technically speaking,
and they already have a patent for that.
That's a cannabis concentrate. That's 99% THC. But that's what our pharmaceutical industry developed. But somehow when the cannabis industry does it.
99%, you say?
No, it's almost pure THC.
Yeah.
So, when the cannabis industry does it, it's a problem and it's addictive and we need to change it. But when the pharmaceutical industry does it, it's a pure, beautiful compound.
Bless their heart.
Yeah, so we need to start looking at things like with a little more nuance, with a little bit of a microscope.
And a bit more objectivity,
Objectivity, yeah. And saying like, we can't keep targeting people just because they're open cannabis consumers. Like, yeah, we are passionate about this plant, but like, we're also looking at everything else, and we are comparing and contrasting, and we need other people to do that too.
And a lot of people are passionate about it because they see how much it has helped other people improve their just daily lives. Just
a lot of things that aren't documented in research too, whether that's overstimulation, whether that's being a good parent, whether that's being a good partner, literally staying alive. There's a lot of really depressed people out there that use cannabis to just increase their quality of life a little bit.
Well, they talk about that 22. I mean, I wonder if that wouldn't be a number I would want to look into. They say 22 veterans. More veterans die coming after they get home than on the battlefield these days. Now, we still have the issue of TBIs and like getting your head rattled over there. We've improved, and you're not as likely to get some kind of, lethal wound. I'm trying to say this in the best way because I would be like, you're not going to get shot in the head as often, but they weren't expecting that. And that's why everyone was coming back with way more mental health injury or TBIs or other issue, because we were now physically surviving the wars, but the toll and the cost. And then also when you look back, my deployment to Afghanistan was like 2012, 2013, earlier days. Now in 2025, truthfully, the withdrawal is what brings it all back. And that's 10 years later. Like, you can be totally fine and then see how something completely falls apart and just go all the way back.
Yeah, and I'm sure alcohol plays a big role because a lot of the
only option available.
That's what I was going to say.
Feeling the pain,
because you're not allowed to consume cannabis or any other harm reduction substances. So everybody I know that spent time in the military does consume a lot of alcohol because they train their body as their coping mechanism with alcohol,
and they have a high tolerance for that, but they don't realize they're killing they're killing themselves from the inside,
and then that causes neuroinflammation, which causes other mental health issues, and it's all cyclic, and it all has to do with access and drug testing and safety, and these are things we're not looking at. But like, if you look at the timeline of somebody in the military, and if you're limiting cannabis for that long and telling people that cannabis is bad, then all of a sudden they get home and you're like, oh, by the way, cannabis helps with PTSD quite a bit. You should try it. Oh, wait, we've been demonizing that for the past.
Well, then you've got veterans who are seeking help and having to be very secretive about it. Like, I'm very happy to see that the VA is going to start studying this stuff.
Yeah.
That's huge. Let's disrupt the stigma. And I don't think the American people realize most things that happen in America get tested on your military first. Like, good or bad, even when it's like regular consumer products, like Google Maps, you have that because the United States Air Force needed to know where the fuck it was going. They put satellites up there and they gave everybody GPS. That's courtesy of the U.S. Air Force.
Cool.
So now we know where we're going in Vegas, trying to get from the Palms to, the Cosmo.
Cool.
Thank you. America's Air Force. But it's just like, we need to do the research. We need to figure shit out. We're doing it.
We are doing it.
We're here.
And we need to educate people so they know what questions to ask, how to be their own advocate, medical advocate. A lot of what we're doing when we're even collecting data, we're going to start moving towards allowing people to have personal reports after doing these studies. So if you did the 2-week study, you would be able to have a printout after so that you could then go to your medical professional, go to your parents and be like, look, the days I used cannabis, I had a 20% reduction in mental health issues, 20% reduction in chronic pain. So we're trying to provide people with ways to be their own advocate.
Plus, you can track it over time. I did participate in that study. Yeah. And at that time, consumption levels were really high. It was a high stress moment of life. And whatever, your symptoms flare up, especially with autoimmune stuff. And now, not so much stress. Autoimmune conditions are a little more managed, probably because I was watching, becoming more mindful.
Yeah.
And then I can report in, okay, I don't need as much actually. Like it's a way for me to track it for myself.
Yeah.
What do I actually need? What's really helping me move the needle? What's pushing it too far? And I think if people had that more connected relationship with nature, their bodies, the whole nine, that then we could be a little bit less worried about accidentally fucking ourselves up or doing something crazy like you would with alcohol. Like I get why legislators are worried, because if you go off the rails with alcohol, it's bad.
Yeah.
If you go off the rails with heroin, it's bad.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'm with you, man. This is not that. Like these apples aren't those oranges.
No.
But so tell me when it comes to like what you're doing up in Maine with the natural world and NAP and pharmacology or pharmacognosy, like what is on the horizon for you this year? What are you really excited about? What projects are you wanting to get funded? How hard is that? Like, I know that's a big question for getting to the top of your hour, but tell me everything, Riley.
No, I mean, yeah, we're always seeking funding for so many different projects. As I mentioned, like we're trying to do more research on the ECS moving forward to actually get that bioactivity, but we are continuing the science of smokeability. This is going to be like a multi-year, multi-phase project. And that project is completely funded by the industry, which I think is really cool. Because the people who want to fund that are people who are interested in evaluating quality. And, people sometimes give us some shit for being like taking money from MSOs to study this. But in my opinion, that's exactly who should be funding research in our industry, and especially supporting people like us.
They're the ones who have the money to do it.
They're the only ones who have the money, and people want to complain all the time. You get complaints if you don't have money. You get complaints if you get the right money.
How fast you can go from a single operator to an MSO?
Yeah,
it's really in MSOs. Not all MSOs are created equally. Yes, some are bad. Some suck. And some are great and they're real people and they're really trying to do this. And congratulations to them. They got to an MSO level.
I agree.
I don't know the level of haterade in the industry. Sometimes I'm like, why guys? Like,
my thing is chill. Like, what's going to make you happy? Sometimes I'm like, you just can't be upset about every outcome. Like I'm happy when we get funding for a project. That's what makes me happy.
To get more research to help more people.
Exactly. Yeah. So I really love the sponsors that supported that, including the MSOs. So hopefully to get more funding to continue that research. We want to do the edible study, and we just want to collect more community data. But what my husband and I do in Maine is a little separate from NAP because we're kind of living like a home study life.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's very, it resonates with the Texas way of life.
A little rogue, a little like.
I mean, when you're out there in the Lone Star State and you're in the country, if you don't know how to survive and something goes wrong, you are screwed. That state will kill you.
Yeah.
Like and there's rattlesnakes, there's all sorts of things. I got my first coral snake in the yard this week.
Those are pretty though.
They are so pretty, but goddamn are they dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. One bite.
Oh my gosh.
But you don't see us restricting them at all. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but like what we do up there, I think there's a lot of parallels between like the ways we live in like the cannabis industry of just being self-reliant and like the power you get from cultivating your own food. Same thing with cultivating your own medicine, growing your own weed. You hear all the time from people who grew their first cannabis plant and they're like, I didn't expect that level of connection with this medicine that I got from growing it. Because you literally see the energy you put into that plant, whether you're watering it, if you provide it with nutrients, even just love trimming it, spending time with it, watching it grow, and then actually consuming those molecules from the plant that then heal you. Like all that energy you put in goes right back into your body.
Psychologically, what we know about the health benefits of just being in the garden.
Yeah.
And then when you combine that with what you just described, it seems like a no-brainer.
Right. And then you add food on top of that. You mentioned food as medicine, and I struggled with an eating disorder for a long time growing up, but preparing my own food and being part of that process changed my whole opinion on food, and just the energy we put into it. And people say all the time, like, how do you have time to hunt, trap, garden, forage, like all of the stuff? And it's like, it's just a priority for us because food is everything. It's your energy that you're providing with your body. So for us, it's very therapeutic to be part of that. And my husband and I love spending time together, doing that, and like harvesting our own food, preparing it, staying up really late, freeze drying, vacuum sealing, it's all part of it. And it makes us look at our medicine differently. It makes us look at the natural world differently in a way that's not like just going for a hike. It's so different.
Well, you can go for a hike and you can go to your grocery store and you can buy a bunch of chicken. You don't know where it comes from. You don't know how they fed it. You don't know what they put in it. Like, honestly, when you get cannabis, you've probably had more testing than your own food has.
Definitely.
Yeah.
100,000%. Yeah.
And it makes you, when I feel like, and thank you for sharing like that you struggled with an eating disorder, that connecting to your food and connecting to your body helped you to see things a little more clearly, because there's something about, and that happens a lot with cannabis users, like what you were sharing in your study, is there's something about that whole process of having to slow down, reevaluate, and actually listen that is good not only for the human body system, but also for all of our greater systems, like our food system, how we're doing agriculture, how we're regulating. Like, if we could just slow down. And I do want to say that, like, we do talk slow in Texas sometimes, but I do want to pull the regulators aside and be like, can you slow down and sit with me for a second? And can we talk about this? Because I think at the end of the day, we have the same concerns.
Yeah.
Like, we're both actually on the same side of this, but we're not speaking the same language because we don't have the same understanding of what's going on here.
Yeah.
And I understand, man, they got a lot that they're dealing with, and it's not their own fault that they're not educated on cannabis, especially if they don't smoke weed. Like, that's a hard ship to steer. Bringing it back to slow down and connect, I think, is going to be key as we're moving forward in the next year.
And it's also a way of respecting things, especially nature. As humans, we tend to live pretty separate from nature. If we're in a city or something, it's kind of us versus nature, where we might see a tree here and there or a shrub here and there, but we've built this metropolis over nature, and nature is just like a little decoration around it. And when you're actually like out there, harvesting, you're hunting, you're trapping, whatever it is, like, it's so different. You're now the minority. You're in the vulnerable place in nature. In nature, you see these systems operating, and you realize how vulnerable you are as a human are.
And how much bigger it is.
And how big nature is, and the systems intertwining. And like the ways we try to reduce nature to a form we can understand. Once you get out into the actual like wilderness and you're actually in the middle of nowhere, you're never going to understand that system.
And oddly enough, like I feel like for some people that could trigger fear, because you're like, wait, we don't know all the answers.
You should be
We're not going to know everything.
Yeah.
I feel like when you know that, though, when you know it's bigger than you and you let go of like, oh, I released that, I'm not actually in charge, which, by the way, if you're living this life, you should know you're not in charge. Like, if you're waking up and you're thinking you're in charge, I know life surprises you every now and then, right? Like, in the good ways and the bad ways. But mostly I found, like, if you really slow down, tap in, it's mostly in all the good ways. I get surprised. And the biggest surprise, when you can let go and surrender like that, be a part of the natural world, is that stress of needing to have all the answers, be in control, move it forward. Like, you can just feel it as you describe it. It makes your knuckles white, and you can let that go, and you can actually see, okay, here's where we are.
And remembering that we're part of nature. I think oftentimes we forget that, like that we are animals, like living on this earth.
We're responding.
And it's very humbling, like when you're like walking in the forest and you're hunting and you're living among other animals, and you need to think like an animal. You need to be part of that system in a way that most people don't interact with the natural world. And I think a lot of people think like maybe hunting is like easy. It's not easy. Like, you're spending so much time, and oftentimes you're coming back empty-handed, but it's still a very therapeutic, like church-like experience being out there. And it really is like nothing feels.
No, they're saying like an hour of birdsong is as good as taking an SSRI in the morning.
100% would stand by that for sure.
I don't know if that's exactly but yeah, I saw that recently, and they're like, this much time in birdsong is mentally as good for you as perhaps an SSRI.
But think of how like so many people live, and I've gotten into the cycle too, and I've had to like consciously break it. But you get through a really busy part of work and you're spending all your time on your computer. Then all of a sudden you're eating like shit because you need fast food,
an hour,
you know?
50 tasks that are like super high intense, but maybe not that thoughtful. You don't have to be too present, but they must get done.
Right. Oh no. And you
eat
keep
the junk
working
food.
and you keep working. Oh no, it's already dark. I don't have time to go outside. I'm going to go home and then I'm just going to watch TV just to relax. And it's like, look at your day from like a bird's eye perspective. Do you think that's a healthy way to live, of just staring at a screen and then, you know, going home, staring at another screen, eating like shit, and then waking up and doing it again?
So then I can imagine if you're doing that for like 8 hours a day, if you took that 1 hour to just
go
do
for a
not
walk,
50 tasks, go for a walk, listen to bird song. If you want, smoke a J, start for the day. If you just had 1 hour compounded over time of not driving yourself insane, I have to imagine you find some relief in that time.
Yes. And I love that, you know, you brought up smoking a J if you want to, you know, that's definitely part of the medicine. And I think cannabis can definitely help you be more aware of like what you need to heal. And that's part of it. Cannabis isn't going to fix all of your problems. Like, I think sometimes, again, back to pharmaceuticals, we want something that's just the easy button of like, I don't feel good, give me a pill. And
There's
it's like,
nothing in life that comes easy.
And we need to realize that about healing and medicine, and we need to be willing to put in effort to heal to get the endpoints that we're looking for. And this goes for everything, even like with the GLP-1 drugs now, like Ozempic.
Ooh,
it's like, you know, we can't expect that to be our only solution.
It can't be.
No.
The most basic natural grounding philosophy principle. I feel like we could go back in time and they would say that like thousands of years ago, they were like, get outside, keep your word, be impeccable. What are those? Be impeccable with your word.
I'm not going to be able to do
No, I can't even remember the book right now.
I know what you're talking about.
MJ Biz, and I'm like, let's cite the 5 agreements.
Yeah,
No?
short circuiting.
The
Can't
4
do that.
agreements. But it's simple stuff. And I think that when you're in the industry, if you go back to basics, just like what you're describing, whether you're looking at the medicine of it, the consumer experience of it, the science and the research of it, when you go back to those basics and get back to fundamental principles, it just gets easier.
It does.
It just gets easier.
Yeah. And, you know, again, thinking of us like animals, like no other animal would we put in the in the environment we're currently put in.
Like let me put a dog in a suit and send him on a 9 to 5, like, and make sure that he pays his taxes and all these things. Yeah, we have created some robust systems and standards of how we want to hold ourselves as a human society, and it requires a little more support.
It does. And something we're doing through our nonprofit, NAP, is like we're really trying to prioritize our working environment as part of one of our like core competencies of what makes us who we are. Because Dr. Shields and I, we are the co-founders of NAP, and we both are we're the hardest working people that we know. We work literally all the time, but at the same time, if we need a break and we're like, my body needs to go for a walk, I need to take today off, my friend's having a party, I'm gonna go, we always make time for like the human part of things, because we're better at thinking and working and advocating for our community when we're happy and we're fulfilled. And that includes spending time outside. That includes making sure we have time for friends and family, and making sure we have enough money to eat healthy or enough time to gather the things to eat healthy.
And I think society is coming around to that, because we're finding that bleed into so many different areas of life where we're realizing it's less productive to drive yourself into the ground, because then the recovery from the burnout, which by the way, you can only offset it for so long.
Yeah.
Trust me, I've looked into it. And I told you, epigenetics, peptides, that's what I forgot about the GL. So the peptide therapies really do have some incredible implications, but this was way before Ozempic. This was like BPC 157, all these other peptides. And someone was like, there's a peptide a few years ago, back in like 2022. And he was telling me, because he wanted us to try to bring it on. And he was like, there's a peptide out there that makes you lose so much weight. There's a peptide out there that makes you lose so much weight. And it's not the peptide that's the problem. It's that we're giving too much peptide to the wrong it's like similar to cannabis. If you're giving too much to the wrong set of people for an off-label use, like,
I can't believe people, like, I'm totally pro GLP-1s for the right people.
Yeah. But for people who actually need it.
But our obsession with being skinny as a culture, it concerns me to see so many people just blindly taking it and expecting zero side effects.
And then it's like, it's similar to let's look at cannabis hyperemesis one more time.
Okay.
Even though I don't want to.
It's okay.
But if we look at it, anyone who is having that experience, the GLP-1 receptor, like if you're having there are people who are reporting some really negative experiences because perhaps they don't act. It's like Adderall. When my friends who didn't have ADD, I do have it.
Yeah.
When my friends who had it did not have ADD would be like, Adderall, and all hyped up. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? It calms me down.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have the thing that it's treating, you're going to have some interesting off-label or potentially adverse effects. And that includes, it's just crazy to me how we allow something to go so wild like it did. Multiple billions, very fast, very little testing. Some people are having some serious issues with their stomach atrophying because it's not the way that they're doing the regimen. It's just too much.
Well, also, it's another one of those situations where the rich are mainly the people who have access to it. And it's like, again, this like Hunger Games situation.
Then you have diabetic patients
that don't have access to the medicine.
Or autoimmune. So I was reading it's very helpful for autoimmune conditions.
I'm sure it's helpful for a ton of things. Yeah.
But those people who are wanting to repair their thyroid can't necessarily get access to it because they don't have 5-10 Gs to drop.
Right.
That is the same limitation that we're almost self-creating with the limitations on regulated psychedelics or cannabis products. Like we're creating the gap. We're creating the distance in between the haves and the have-nots, and the haves who are using just for fun, and the people who have not, and they actually really need it.
Yeah. Like, it's a great comparison.
We'll figure it out, hopefully.
I think we will.
Yeah, it's all confusing, man. Peptides, genetics, and cannabis, oh my.
I know. And I know, like, I feel like cannabis does interact with the GLP-1 in some way. And I think that's part of it.
THCV has something to do with this. So we have a farmer who, and I know we got to like wrap up the show soon.
Oh, man.
But there is a farmer in Texas who has been growing like organically really rich THCV.
Is it hemp?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So, and he's growing, it's got the THCV in it, and it's organic, and it's really nice, and it's beautiful. And they were not conducting a study. He's not a scientist, but he was getting consumer information, and they were finding that they were having some real impacts with people who have diabetes.
Interesting.
So it's just, there's so much that we don't understand. And that was years ago. Now people are catching on with THCV, and they want to be on that train for not always the best reasons. Mostly weight loss reasons.
I was going to say, mostly weight loss, but we are actually running a study here in Vegas with a product that is THCV dominant, and it's called Hybegon.
Wait, tell me more.
I would love to.
Hybegon.
Hybegon. So it's actually a product to help you reduce the psychoactive effects if you're feeling over-medicated, overwhelmed with THC. Mm-hmm. So it's a product that can help you kind of bring you back down to your baseline. And THCV essentially acts in the opposite way of THC. So the theory behind this is it essentially will kick THC off the receptor and allow you to feel less high. So we have some great preliminary data from it, but if you or anyone else wants to participate in the study, you can actually sign up. Like we're recruiting right now for it.
They're doing THCV beverage. If I, as a consumer, if I could drink a low-calorie THCV beverage to help me regulate my autoimmune issue and I have like half of a thyroid left.
Yeah.
To help me regulate my metabolism and help repair that issue, I would
be aware 100%. Though THCV, like many of the cannabinoids, acts in kind of a weird way that's very dose dependent. So like it's going to act in very different ways if you take a high dose versus a low dose. So the dosing of the products matters a lot. And I do think that this Hybegon product is dosed, like they've done a lot of research on the back end, but I'm always thinking like for advocacy purposes, a product that can help you reduce your high, like
if you need some, but then you need to pull back.
Exactly.
And you can scale like if you can get an nano-emulsified edible that can help you pull back just a little bit.
Exactly.
Small gram dose. Like if you take too high of an edible and you can scale down.
Exactly. And it happens all the time, right? So like, if people who are heavy cannabis consumers have a few of those in their house in case someone is over medicated and feeling uncomfortable. It
could be a solution. We could come up with a solution for if a child accidentally doses,
or a dog, or any sort of animal. It's huge, and like we need the Narcan equivalent in our industry because whether you're driving a vehicle, whether you have to look after your kids, whether you're feeling groggy in the morning, you have a weed hangover, like it'd be really nice to have something to reverse that for people.
That's very and we're going to have to bring you back. You're going to have to come to Texas. I'm going to go to Maine.
Okay, cool.
You're going to teach me how to hunt up in Maine.
Yeah, we're going to go on a turkey hunt.
I'm going to bring her down to Texas. You're going to come look at our THCV that we have.
Cool.
It's a good garlic.
Cool.
And then we're going to save the world.
Awesome.
Yeah.
One step at a time.
One step at a time. Riley, before we let you go, any parting thoughts? Anything that you would like the world out there to know about cannabis in 2025, or what you guys are up to in 2025 and looking forward to?
I'll plug our email list because that's the best way to stay.
It's the best way to actually participate in the research.
Any new research studies that we're doing, anytime we're sharing data on previous research studies, we always share that via our newsletter. So if you just go to appliedpharmacognosy.org, it's the first thing that pops up to join the email.
And your Instagram?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube under the name Cannabicam. And then I have my own podcast called Bioactive. If you want to listen to that, it's a little nerdy podcast.
No, it's actually amazing. And if you liked the first episode with Max and Twinkle, you should definitely visit the Bioactive podcast, because Riley actually takes you behind the scenes at a grow, and she dives even deeper into that science of sulfur and aroma and all of it. Yes, and it was Twinkle.
Yeah, Twinkle's really cool. But yeah, and then the only thing I'd say to any like consumers is like, if you're new to cannabis, try some quality sun-grown cannabis and share it with a friend. Get the word out there. Try to use organic, high-quality products and spread the word about them, because we need more education, and we need people to have a good time with this plant and to share their experience with the world, because it does matter a lot.
Yes. Riley, I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on. This was really fun.
It's been amazing.
Yeah.
You have been here with us for, our 5th episode of Highly Informed? I'm not sure. Day 2 filming. We're going. We're almost there, halfway. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, as always, stay elevated.